In this video, I'll show you my method for creating grungy, grimy racing graphics, and it might open your eyes to a whole new way to work in Photoshop. Let's get it. On the left side is the graphic we'll be recreating in this tutorial. What I really love about this style is that we're gonna have all these different moving parts, photos, little graphic elements, background imagery, text, and we'll be able to just merge them all together when we're done and have printable artwork. So as far as color separations, this is about as minimal as it gets. We have 2 layers. So when we're done with this, we're gonna have our color layer, and then we'll have essentially what is a false underbase. So this is meant to mimic a printing effect where if it's an old graphic, maybe the print is off a little bit or it's worn down and you start to see the underbase of the graphic. The first thing we'll do is add a few layers that will allow us to work within this style live. So what that means is that, we're not going to be adding like little stippling effects. We're not going to be adding, threshold to individual elements. We're just going to be able to work and create within this style. The first thing I'll do is add a pattern adjustment layer over the entire canvas, and the pattern itself is going to be noise. So why would we want to do that? Well, essentially, whenever you're using threshold within your graphics, if you're using any elements that are a little bit more complex and intricate, you're gonna lose a lot of that detail if you're relying solely on threshold. And it's especially helpful with background photos where there's a lot of like clouds or there's other hazy elements, outer glows, things like that. If we didn't use noise, those would just sort of be blobs, and we want to try to avoid that. So I'll jump to my top layer, and then I'll click this plus icon at the bottom of the layers panel, and that's going to add a new layer. Then I'll go to Edit, Fill, and under Contents, I'll change it to white. Click OK. Now I'm going to Filter, Noise, Add Noise, and I'm going to use an amount of 100%, right? Nice round number. Click OK. And then I'm just gonna grab anywhere pretty much over here, but I'm gonna grab like a big chunk using the rectangular marquee tool, and I'll go to Edit, Define Pattern, and I'll just call this Noise Pattern, okay? So now we can get rid of this layer, and we'll go down to the bottom of our layers panel where it says Create New Fill or Adjustment Layer. Click that. And towards the top, you'll see pattern. Once you click that, you'll be able to select the noise pattern, right? So I've already got one from the previous time that I created this graphic. So select your noise pattern. We're gonna change the scale to 250 and then click OK. So let's hide this layer. Then at the bottom of the layers panel, we'll make another adjustment layer, but this time we're gonna select threshold, and we're not going to make any adjustments here. We'll probably end up making some adjustments, but we don't need to worry about that now. So I'll just close this properties window. One more time, new adjustment layer, and this time select solid color. Now, to be clear, this is only if you want to use something other than white in your graphic. If you just want to make a black and white graphic and use this technique, you can just skip this step, but I wanted to make the entire thing this like highlighter yellow color. And this just allows me to quickly adjust the color like this. I just find it very easy. So I just add this layer on top, and then I change the blending mode of the color fill to multiply. The threshold can be normal. And then we'll change pattern fill to overlay. All right. So you should have these 3 layers: color fill, threshold, pattern fill. Cool. The next thing we'll do is under these 3 effects, we'll add a new layer. The next thing we'll do is underneath these 3 layers, we'll add another new layer. And right away, we'll hit Command G to put it in its own group. And I'm going to rename this Artwork Group. And then I'm going to select all 3 of these effects. I'll start by selecting the top one, hold down the Shift key, grab the bottom effect, and then right click, create clipping mask. So now it's only clipping to this artwork layer. So as you saw before that, it was affecting this whole graphic over here. Highlight all of them, right click, create clipping mask. So now anything that I add within this artwork group, we're gonna add all these different layers. They're all going to be affected by these. Let's get this car added into the artwork group. I'll jump out to the Master Bundle Deluxe. If you're not familiar with this, It is a bundle of over 1,400 design tools and presets, 65 plus unique graphic kits, and I use it all the time to design for some really big clients. We're gonna be utilizing the Element and Design packs and the Hyperspeed Elements pack volume 1. And now this method is going to work with whatever photos and graphics you want to use. This is just easy for me to utilize because it's right here, and I already built out this graphic actually to promote this pack previously. So that's why you're seeing this used in this tutorial. But I do definitely recommend checking it out because it's pretty dope. So I included the car that I used on the product image as a bonus. So I'm just gonna grab that. A couple people asked me if it was included, and I hadn't included it. And then I went back and updated the pack because I was like, sure, why not? I'll throw it in there. So I'm just gonna drag this into Photoshop. So I'm just gonna make sure that it's first sized appropriately. And we're gonna have to make it a little bit bigger. Cool, we'll slide it over. And as you can probably see, it looks a lot different on the left than it does on the right. The reason for that is we just need to adjust the threshold level. So to do that, you can click into this adjustment adjustment layer right here. And that's gonna allow you to make some adjustments. So we're gonna just add more of this threshold, and that's gonna bring in a lot more of that negative space that we're seeing on the right side. I'm just kind of eyeballing it here. That should work. Now it looks more like it does on the left. Let's get more elements added. Next, we'll go to this raceway graphic right here. So we'll jump back out to the Hyperspeed Elements pack. We'll jump into the Clean Elements folder. Before I do that, I do want to mention that there's also vector versions of all of these elements. So like if that's more your speed, no pun intended, you can just go through here and grab anything you want, open it in Illustrator, bring it into Photoshop, and do it that way. Since like resolution is not really something I'm concerned about because I'm using a threshold, I'm just gonna jump into the Clean Elements PNG folder, go down to, I believe it is 56, the raceway element, drag it over, and we're good to go. This next thing is pretty important. I don't want this to happen to you and not know what's going on. So we're gonna bring in these 3 stars, and they're essentially just like 3 solid black icons. And when I bring them into Photoshop and into this canvas, they essentially disappear. Now you might be saying, yeah, Fuller, they're black icons and you're using a black background, so it's not surprising that we can't see them. But the actual issue, aside from that, is that this color fill layer is set to multiply. And so it's just affecting the lighter values. If it was set to screen, you'd be able to see these right away, right? Because they're solid black. But we're gonna continue using multiply. And so the solution is just putting a color overlay of white onto these icons, right? So if we change them to white, now we can see them and just keep it moving. I'll just continue to build out this graphic, add new elements, and then we'll jump back in when I add in some text because I've got some cool stuff to show you. Now that we've got the majority of these graphics added in on the right side, I just want to take a second and talk about negative space and balance. The reason I want to talk about that is because it's come up a lot in the GFXWRLD community where designers are adding their graphics and looking for feedback. And I just see a lot of young designers who don't quite have a grasp on negative space and balance. So for me, I like to create graphics that are very well balanced. Small things that I do usually have to do with the space between different elements. So for example, I'll just use the lasso tool to sort of quickly illustrate. So there's like negative space here, and here, and here, and it's about the same. There's negative space here, and there's negative space here, and it's similar. It's not exactly the same, but it's similar, right? There's negative space here and here. It's just finding these like little pockets where you can add elements. Overall, it just helps with your composition, and at this point it's just second nature to me, and I know it's not something everyone pays attention to when they're just starting off. So if your goal is to create commercially successful graphics that are just very well balanced, I think that's something you definitely want to pay attention to. So let's get this text added over here on the left side. I'm going to grab the horizontal type tool, and then I'll type out build your WRLD world. And then I'll grab the move tool and I'll check show transform controls at the top so I get this nice box around the text. I'll hold down the shift key, click outside of the text, and that's gonna show this sort of like curved set of arrows, right? And then I'll just be able to, while holding down the shift key, drag this to the left, and it's going to rotate it by 15 degrees each time rather than trying to just free form it and hope that you land on 90 degrees. Little tip for you there. I'm gonna move this down, and then we're gonna add that TM symbol in a second. Just let me size this up here. Okay, I'll go to the end of this phrase and I'll click with the horizontal type tool. Then I'll go to Window Glyphs and I'll find that trademark symbol. So it's already highlighted because I used it previously. So I'll just double click that. We've got the TM logo added, or the TM symbol rather, sorry. And then I actually need to size that up a bit more. Bump it over to the left. Actually, no, it should stay here. Looking at the image on the left, it falls right under that R. And so I think this star needs to be smaller. That's the issue. All right, move that down and decrease the size. Cool. This is kind of interesting. I actually had to reach out to Duran Studios about this. I figured he would know what was going on. If you don't know Duran, he's an amazing designer, super dope dude. That's the homie. Check out his YouTube channel after you watch this video. He also sells design assets. He's crushing it right now. So I sent him a text and I was like, bro, what is going on? Every time I add an outer glow, even though I'm using threshold, I've got everything in this group, everything else is being affected by this threshold effect. Outer glow is not. So why is that? Like, it was super technical answer, but the fix for it is on this bottom layer, you just need to add a solid color of black. And now when I add the outer glow, you're gonna see that it's affected the way it's supposed to, right? So you can just go down to this color fill layer, like if you're working the way I am, and just change it to screen, and you'll be good. That way you can still see this left side. Super strange. I just couldn't figure it out. Shout out to Duran, the Photoshop mad scientist, for helping us out with this tutorial. Everyone go give him a follow on Instagram to say thank you. I'm gonna click back into this text and actually add a stroke around the outside as well. So we'll make sure position is set to outside. We'll probably use, I don't know, like 40. Let's try 40 as the stroke, and then increase the size and spread of this glow. And I'm just looking at the left side here. So now I'm gonna duplicate this build your world text, because we're gonna use this same effect to write the numbers 85 and 24. So we can keep the same effect and we'll just change it to 85. Cool, move it here, and then duplicate this, move it over here and change it to 24. Let's bring in the vintage texture last as sort of the icing on the cake, and jump to these clouds in the background that you see sort of scattered throughout the graphic. Before we move on, I have to tell you about the GFXWRLD online community. Our members range from t-shirt designers to clothing brand owners, print shops, everyone from seasoned pros to beginners just getting started. That means you can ask questions and get feedback or advice from industry professionals. You've got a couple options depending on how serious you want to take this. You can join the premium community, which gives you access to exclusive tutorials and design tools, the raw Photoshop design files from all of my new tutorials, as well as weekly calls with me and other designers where you can ask questions and get feedback directly. In the free community, you'll be able to interact with others and get access to a rotating list of freebies. There, you'll also find my 101 course on the basics of t-shirt design in Photoshop. I hope I see you there. Now back to the tutorial. Next, I'm going to add a group within this group, and I'll explain exactly why in a moment. So let's start by grabbing this top layer. I'll hold down the shift key, grab the bottom layer, and hit Command G to put them in a group together. And then I'll rename this main artwork. Next, let's bring in these clouds. I'll go to plugins, stock up, and we're gonna use this plugin that I developed for Photoshop. If you're not familiar with this, essentially this allows you to search from millions of copyright-free stock images without ever leaving Photoshop. So all you have to do is search for what you're looking for. I'm just gonna find some nice looking clouds. I honestly can't remember what I used for this graphic on the left, but I'll just grab, let's see, how about these? These look pretty solid, and they'll open up right in Photoshop. I can close this and decrease the size. If this is exactly what I use, like, then my recall is incredible, but I'm honestly not sure if it is. So let's talk about why I added that extra group within this group, right? What this is gonna allow me to do is I can double click into this group and add an outer glow using black. So that's going to basically allow me to have that separation between the graphics in the foreground and these background clouds, and that separation just looks really nice with this type of graphic. And so this is how I was able to achieve this effect. From here, it's really just playing around with, you know, different placements for these clouds, and what I would recommend doing is just masking them out, and then that way we'll be able to live edit them as well. So if you click this icon right here, it's like a rectangle with a circle in it. It says layer masks. Just click that with your clouds highlighted or whatever element you're using in the background. So now we can sort of paint away areas of this background image that we don't want to use. And by the way, you can always adjust like brightness and contrast of the image itself. If you don't want to like mess with your threshold settings, you could just like decrease the brightness, up the contrast, get more or less of, you know, the graphic. And I definitely did that on this left side. But also, now that I have this masked out, if I click this layer mask thumbnail right here, which currently is just like a white rectangle, I can grab my brush tool. I'll pick out a nice soft round brush, and then I'll use black as the foreground color, a little bit bigger. And now I can just sort of start painting away areas that I don't like. And honestly, I should be using a bigger brush than that. Yeah, something like that. So that you can sort of click around it and you'll still get that like hazy cloud effect. It's not gonna like be harshly cut off. So I just kept duplicating them out and then using the layer mask. And I was essentially just able to, you know, create these different patches of clouds in the background. So I'm good with this. I ended up adding a lot more of the cloud detail on the right side than you see on the left. Aside from the fact that it was just a different cloud image. So my memory recall is maybe not that good. I just liked that I was able to find like more pockets to add that little bit of background detail. I messed around with the outer glow on the main artwork, and yeah, I'm happy with the result. So now let's get this vintage texture added in, and that's gonna set the whole thing off. Just to make things super straightforward, I'm gonna collapse this artwork group, and then I'm gonna grab all of the effects and just put everything on this right side in its own group. And I'll name this group Remake. Now to add in this vintage texture, you do wanna make sure you're using a group. So aside from just like an organizational thing, in order to use a layer mask with texture, at least the method that I'm using, you do want all of your layers in a group. So with this remake group highlighted at the bottom of the layers panel, I'll click layer masks. Then I'm gonna hold down the option key and click this layer mask thumbnail. So it should turn your entire canvas white. Next, I'm gonna jump back to the Master Bundle Deluxe, go to Textures, Vintage Textures Volume 1, and we're gonna use this really nice vintage plastisol texture. So I'm just gonna drag this into my canvas. Because this artwork is a bit wider than the canvas I would normally use for t-shirt designs, I'm gonna drag this over and basically create a wider texture that will cover this entire graphic. So I've got this main texture here. I'm gonna hit Command J, drag this over. I think I just kind of lucked out that this is a really nice texture that blends together. You could technically, like if there was a separation in the middle of the textures, just grab the whole thing and use generative fill, and it'll probably fill in the gaps I don't need to add anything extra to this tutorial. There's already enough, but just a little tip there that would help if you're using some other textures and they don't quite match up. So the next thing I'll do is merge these two layers together. And then I'm just going to grab this whole piece of texture and hit Command C to copy. Then I'm going to hold down the Option key, click into this layer mask thumbnail. It'll turn the whole canvas white, and then I'll hit Command V, and that's going to paste in that texture that I just used. And now I'll hold down the Option key, click the layer mask thumbnail again. I'll just use the Move tool and just move this over so that it's back on the right side and covers this graphic, right? So we've got this nice texture added, but it's not down to the pixel anymore. So I'm not just able to merge this group together and grab all the pixels like I mentioned at the beginning of the video. So what I'll do is make sure this layer mask thumbnail is highlighted, and then I'll go to Image, Adjustments, you guessed it, Threshold. You can adjust this however you want. I think the default settings are going to be fine for me, so I'll just click OK. So now we've got this artwork that is down to the pixel. It's thresholded in every way imaginable. The next thing I'm going to do is just get rid of this final artwork on the left side, reduce that file size a little bit. I'm going to grab this part of the canvas and just go to Image, Crop. And then I'm going to save this document. You should be saving along the way, but this is a pretty good time for me to save since we're now like transitioning into finalizing this artwork. So just a heads up, I did get a prompt to save this out as a .psb file, which is sort of like the sister file of PSD. It's for larger documents. If Photoshop ever asks you if you want to save it as a PSB, you can. I've never ran into any issues with PSBs. They're just for larger documents. So if I were now to finalize this artwork and get it ready to send off for print, I would do the following. I'd go to Layer, Flatten Image, and now you're gonna see some changes that happen right away with these small details. You actually see it gets a little bit more intricate. That might be a good thing or a bad thing to you, depending on how you feel about the result. I would like to have it look a little bit more clumpy, for lack of a better word, like it was before. I guess like less detail. So my simple fix for that is just going to Filter, Blur, Gaussian blur, and then just blurring it by like 2 pixels. Click OK. Then I'll go to Image, Adjustments, Threshold, and like re-threshold the image with that blur. And that's going to thicken it back out again. And then from here, I can use the magic wand tool, make sure anti-alias and contiguous are not clicked at the top. Click the white, hit Command J. That's gonna put this white layer all on its own. And then I'll just create a solid color of black in the background. You could also just fill that background layer, whatever's easiest for you. Next, we're gonna take this layer, double click into it, add a color overlay so it's back to being green again. And then I'm going to add an inner shadow, and this is going to add that underbase effect that I mentioned at the very beginning of the video. We'll change the inner shadow blend mode to normal, change the opacity to 100, change the color to white. You can do like light gray, white, doesn't really matter because you can always change it later. So I'll just use white for now. Click OK, make sure the distance is anywhere, honestly, you can go between like 5 pixels to maybe like 9. So I'm at 9, I'll click OK, zoom out. That's cool, that definitely gives the same effect that we saw before. And so with this now, I'll right click and rasterize layer style. This is about as destructive as it gets here, folks. We're then going to click the green, Command J, throw it to the top, go back to that original layer, click the white, Command J, throw it to the top. I'll delete this bottom layer, and now we have our main green layer. We've got our sort of underbase layer, and we're good to go. We could just save this out as a PSD. Honestly, it turned out better than the first version. Super crusty, super musty, exactly the vibe that we were going for. I'm gonna mock this up on a hoodie, see how it looks. I already know exactly which hoodie mock-up I wanna use, so I'll use the Mockable plugin and search Los Angeles garments, and we'll grab this Los Angeles garment dye pullover hoodie. Click open mockup. I'll hide the quick tutorial, hide your design, and then I'll double click into this artwork layer thumbnail, bring up the placement guide, go back to the artwork, and I'll just merge these two layers together. Then Command A, grab the whole thing, Command C to copy, back to the artwork layer, placement guide, Command V, paste it in, and I'm not gonna bother converting it to a smart object. I think it's fine. It actually just might end up looking a little crunchier, which is what we're going for. I'm gonna make this nice and big on this hoodie. Make sure it covers over the pocket. We're going super oversized. And then I'll hide the placement guide. Command S to save, back to our mockup, and boom. We could try some different colors. I think for something like this, I would use, like an off black. So you definitely don't want to discount picking out the right garment, wash, and color whenever you're trying to create this sort of crunchy vintage vibe. If you learned anything in this video, all that I ask is you take literally 1 second and hit that subscribe button. It would truly mean everything to me. I'll catch you in the next video. Peace.